Hello, all. Welcome to another episode of MFP Live. In fact, I guess this would be the beginning of the 2021 season, we could call it. Welcome to all of you. I'm glad you're here. I'm Donna Ladd. I'm the editor of the Mississippi Free Press, at least in current day. And I am going to apologize because I have a cat that just broke loose. So if something dramatic happens, then my apologies. Someone is supposed to be coming to take care of this cat. So I'm very excited today. I told you guys. Everybody knows Bobby, Charlie. So I really apologize for this. But he's figured out how to break out of the back room. So here he is.
Not bothering me.
No, this is Bobby, my bobtail. Okay, so he's being taken away now. So everybody's, all my Facebook friends will be laughing about Bobby interrupting my show already. But anyway, welcome all. And I'm super excited for this episode because many of you know that the Mississippi Free Press is named for a civil rights movement era newspaper called the Mississippi Free Press. That was based here in Jackson, but kind of covered the state. We're going to find out a lot more about that today because Charlie Butts is here. And Charlie, who lives in Cleveland, not Mississippi, Ohio, is joining us. And he was, I think he's going to tell us that he was probably the longest running editor of the Mississippi Free Press, and kind of give us some background on that. But first, welcome, Charlie. I'm just thrilled to have you here.
Very nice to be here.
So
I did spend a lot of time running. Yeah.
What now?
I did spend a lot of time running.
Right. Running from people, right? So, so Charlie, just to give everybody a little bit of background here. Catch my breath after the cat attacked me. Charlie called me. I knew I've talked long about the Mississippi Free Press because, and I told him this story recently when I moved back to Mississippi, and it was 2001 is when we first started talking about doing the Jackson Free Press, but we didn't have a name yet. And so we were kind of going through this whole process of trying to figure out a name. And at one point it was going to be the Jackson Observer, and maybe it was the Jackson Weekly, but we didn't like any of those names. And so a friend of mine, Amy Heimerl, who was down, and she's a journalist and an editor, she was helping us start the paper. And so she was looking in a book about the Black press in Mississippi, and she read about the Mississippi Free Press. And really, that was my first kind of understanding that the Mississippi Free Press had existed. I knew about the Jackson Advocate and some of the other things that happened, but I didn't really know much about the Mississippi Free Press. So Amy, she yelled out, well, "What about the Jackson Free Press?" And it was so perfect, especially knowing even the little bit of history that we knew at that point, that Medgar Evers was involved in the startup, that other civil rights leaders that I didn't know as much about yet, like RLT Smith and some others were involved in it. It just became the name very quickly. And then we started trying to learn more about the Mississippi Free Press. So after all these years later, when we've started this statewide nonprofit called the Mississippi Free Press, was when Charlie Butts got in touch with me one day. I think you sent an email and just said something like, "Hey, I was the editor of the first Mississippi Free Press. We should talk." And so that's why we're here. So I say, Charlie, tell everybody a little bit about yourself at this point, and particularly just tell your story about how you ended up in Mississippi in the first place during this very tense and violent civil rights movement in the 60s.
Well, like a lot of young people, I was a college dropout. Was going to Oberlin College in Ohio, and actually came down to Jackson for the summer, I thought. But at the outset, almost as soon as I got there, I realized there was this newspaper that had been started in order to support the candidacy of Reverend Robert L.T. Smith Sr. And it was really a clever idea to have a weekly paper to support the candidacy for somebody running for Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And the principles behind that were Medgar Evers, Robert L. T. Smith Jr., the Reverend's son, who was an independent grocer, and Dr. Britton. And those three had begun this paper, and it supported that candidacy. They really didn't expect to win that primary, and they didn't, but it was a very effective voter registration and voter information, why it's important to vote kind of paper.
Mm-hmm.
And so just about the time I got there, the primary was over. And since they had heavily subsidized this paper, they didn't have the money to keep it going. I thought it'd be really good for the movement to have that kind of press available. So I sat down with them and said, would you mind if I try and keep it going? And they kind of chuckled and said, yes, we would be happy to have you do it, but you got to understand we're not going to be able to put any more money in it. And I certainly didn't have resources. And so I think it was one of those circumstances where they really didn't think it would go very far. But where it was a young person, I was too young to vote at that point, that I didn't know what I couldn't do.
Right.
And that's what has made so many young people successful, certainly in that civil rights movement and in so many times since. And so I was there, as it turned out, for 2 years.
Wow. And that's a long time, for
in the South during that time, that's a
right.
long time.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, when you told me that before, I was like, wow, you did it for 2 years, and you didn't come in with any particular journalism experience, right?
Correct.
Right.
I had written a column in the high school paper one year, I think. But that's where I learned a little bit of the power of the press, because just as I don't know, I think I was a sophomore, I began writing it regularly, and it was a weekly paper, and the editors were very happy to have my column. And but my deal was, I'll give you a column every week, but nobody can change it. And so after I'd been going for quite a while, and usually they are humorous, and so I knew that both townspeople and the student body would always turn to it, because they, how you turn to the comics, you want to have a little smile. And so I wrote a pretty critical article of some contest the student senate was having with the principal, probably over clothing, policy or something like that. And so the librarian, Miss May, was going to cancel it. And so the editors came and told me. They said, "Well, we promised that we wouldn't change anything." She didn't cancel it. She changed it. So I went into the library and asked for it and tore it up. And evidently, Miss May would rather meet the wrath of the principal than the wrath of the rest of the community for being a censor. And they came back and asked me, did I have an original copy of that column? And it ran. So that was kind of my first feeling that the press can have some power.
Yeah, I had some. I may have told you I had some similar experiences over at Neshoba Central High School when I was the editor of the paper. I had a teacher that pushed me into it, but I kept getting in trouble. Like the cafeteria ladies got mad at me because someone wrote a piece, a funny piece talking about bad cafeteria food. I mean, it was just, I would get called to the principal's office just constantly. And we were doing some things that were a little edgy, on this was in the 70s, on racism and some other things, little edgy. But, my principal loved it, but he'd have to call me to the office. So everybody thought I was getting yelled at, and then he became one of my friends and encouragers. But I know what you mean. It kind of gets in your blood. And I like to tell that story to people because it's like, people have been giving me hell for decades over journalism. And it's like, it kind of toughens you up, you're just kind of expecting it on some level,
But the truth is, I really didn't know anything. I
Yeah.
never had any journalistic training at all. Never had any business training because, of course, this became a business. I had to constantly be raising money. We raised some, actually got some decent ads and raised some that way. Raised some through direct subscription, but most of it was we fundraised. I mean, we proselytized to people outside of the South.
Outside of the state. Yep. Yeah. Well, so, okay, before you get deeper into that, because I want to talk more specifically about the paper, but so you came here basically as a civil rights volunteer, right?
Yes, right.
And did you get training before you came?
No.
You got to Mississippi? You just came?
I just showed up. Training, I don't think there was much training going on until
later.
The Freedom Summer. That's when, of course, brilliant Bob Moses conceived of all that came from that. So much came from that.
So you just showed up. I mean, I just want, there's a lot of things going on in the world, and just talk a little bit about what that felt like as a young man somewhere else, hearing so many things about how violent it was in the South, what that felt like, what motivated you to do that.
For years back then and since, because I've spoken a lot about this experience and I've often asked that question. For a long time, I really didn't have a very good answer. But then when I started doing my memoirs and wrote about when I was in fourth grade and took a bus into the city of Cleveland, into the inner city, into the Black ghetto, to go to a Karamu Theater, which was which had a children's theater component that I participated in 3 times a week for 3 years, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And almost immediately I met and had what became my best friend, who I would visit in inner city Cleveland, and he would come to me, and I was in a suburb of Cleveland at that time. My folks who had set me up to this probably didn't know where it was going to lead in my life, but knew that it would have a dramatic effect. And certainly then as a high school kid beginning to read about all these kind of things, I felt I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this solution. And I always felt that the vote was the key thing. I certainly appreciated all the other rights to try and work for, but I thought if you had the vote, that those things would come, and if you didn't have the vote, it would be probably pretty hard to keep those other things.
Right.
And so they did go hand in hand. But I always thought that the vote was the key thing, and I thought this newspaper, and of course, it was originally begun with the idea of supporting a candidate, which is mostly a voter registration, a voter information thing. And certainly that was a great focus of Medgar Evers. And so that just seemed like a perfect fit for me. But I didn't know anything about it until I got down there.
Wow. Who did you meet early on who influenced you down here?
Well, I'm sure I had met Medgar in the course of the first several days that I was there. But I asked for the meeting with him, and I'm not sure that Dr. Britton came to that, but I know that Robert L.T. Smith Jr., the grocer, the son of the candidate and co-owner of the paper, that he was at that meeting when I proposed, hey, what do you think? Should we keep this going? It was done rather quickly because it was going to stop. And
Wow.
I thought if it ever got interrupted, kind of resurrecting it, that may not be true, but I kind of thought that it's important to have those
Right.
sequence of volume numbers and to keep publishing.
And that was part of the story I just didn't really understand. I knew highlights of the story about of the Mississippi Free Press. I knew that they had started it together, and all the men that you were talking about there are black or were black.
Yes.
And so it was started by black men in Mississippi who were trying to elect a black man. It was during, and they were civil rights leaders and
trying to get people registered and
right.
trying to inform people of the importance of how if voting has been something that you were kept out of, it was kind of those other people's business.
That's right.
The showing how it can be valuable, what it can mean, and how it all works, and how government works. That just seemed like it was just a terribly important thing to do. One of the things, if you look at what these put up on the screen there, one of the things shortly after we started was important for me. You see where it says the Jackson, Mississippi, Saturday, September, so on. Mm-hmm. Over to the left, that's a Union bug. And that was very important for me because I felt that covering the efforts of people trying to organize in Mississippi, and those people were as at much physical risk as the civil rights workers, and they were getting shot and they were getting beaten and jailed and losing their jobs and the rest. Well, we couldn't get that Union bug in Mississippi. There was no Union presses.
Right.
And so I discovered someone in Memphis, and that's where they printed our paper from about the third or fourth issue.
Wow.
After I took over.
Wow.
And, so it meant putting that copy. At first, I was driving it up all night, and then waiting while they put the paper together, and then bringing it back the next day. But we finally got so we could put it on a bus. The 1 a.m. Greyhound went up to Memphis. Wow. They met it. I dummied up the paper and sent it with a copy, and they put it together.
Well, and it's really important for people who are listening or watching this to understand, especially younger people, that there was no media to speak of that was allowed to do the kinds of things. There was just the existing daily newspapers. Like especially here, Clarion Ledger and Jackson Daily News, were known as, especially the Jackson Daily News, as I understand it, were known as the, probably the most racist papers in the country, or at least among them.
Jimmy Ward, who was the editor of the Jackson Daily News, had a column on the left-hand side. So I didn't put mine on the front, but I ended up having a column too under a pseudonym, doing the same kind of thing. A column is a little different than a news story. I mean, now with the Jackson Daily News and the Clarion Ledger, they could certainly veer a bit from the truth, and certainly leave a lot of things out.
Right.
Where we tried to meet the editorial test that any good publication would have of having good sources and things that we were certain were the facts. A column, on the other hand, you can speculate, you can talk about things. I didn't want to lie there, but we could. So I set up what am I trying to say? The name of a pen, like a pen name.
Yeah.
And it was, that person went all over the state. Of course, I ended up doing it on the phone.
Yeah.
But wherever the action was, he was able to be there.
Wow. And this is a fine point to put on it, but this was dangerous work. I was reading earlier today, I was in newspapers.com looking for articles that were about the Mississippi Free Press in the 60s, not just these that are available online that are the Mississippi Free Press. And, so I would find articles from like the Greenwood Commonwealth, and which was a newspaper, incidentally, in Greenwood, started by James K. Vardaman, who was a terrible racist. I mean, and or the Clarion Ledger or the Natchez paper, and they would all call. They were very derisive about the Mississippi Free Press. It was a colored weekly, or it was a Negro weekly. It would like these insulting phrases, And then I saw an article, and I think it was in the Greenwood paper. And I don't know if this was before or after you got there, but it was talking about, he just put it up. 22 people were arrested in Indianola for distributing copies of the Mississippi Free Press. And this was in, what's the date up there? 1963. So you would have been editor, right? Didn't you say that? Yeah. Right. So do you remember that? It's like they were distributing the paper. I don't know if it was for an event or something, but 22 people were arrested for distributing the paper. I mean, that's stunning to think about.
So you were talking about the fact that the other papers, what they said that was not correct, or or a lot of what they just left out and didn't cover it all. One other thing that should be said is that there's not many people reading newspapers of any kind, because we were able to become the third largest circulating newspaper in Mississippi, behind just the Daily Clarion Ledger and the Daily Jackson Daily News. They were the only papers larger than we were. So there were some dailies and a bunch of weeklies, but all much smaller. But that's not because we were so big. It's because nobody was reading.
Wow.
Both a factor of illiteracy, and I guess there just was not that much print information available.
Wow.
I remember my car broke down one early morning, which wasn't a fun thing to have happen, out in rural, it was someplace south of Jackson, but it was in a little town, and it was right across the way from a drugstore. And they, while I was waiting for someone to come and pick me up and help, a newspaper delivery people, or publication delivery, dropped off some newspapers and one Time magazine at the drugstore. And that's what was going to be distributed in that town. So one person was going to read Time magazine, but everybody else was going to read, if they read anything at all, would be just totally local.
Wow. Well, so what were, so we, and I was seeing in these clips, and Todd's putting some of them up there. By the way, they called you a spark plug in this, in this piece. I do want, I want us to show the other article in your picture that was in a piece that was kind of about you at some point here. But so people are a little bit more familiar with names like Harding Carter, who did the Harding Carter Jr., who did the Delta Democrat Times, Hazel Brannon Smith, who had done the Lexington paper, but then she had a paper here in Jackson. And I know we're going to get into talking about her a little bit because she started printing the Mississippi Free Press. And then like Oliver Emmerich, I guess, who was down in Macomb, and these were editors who, and newspaper owners in some cases, or in all cases, those who had kind of grown up a segregationist, and had become more what was considered moderate, but who were speaking out about civil rights.
And they were Mississippians.
That's right. And we know a lot about them, or at least a lot of us do. But they face serious threats in many ways. They face serious boycotts. There are a lot of stories out there about, what the Citizens Council, right, was pushing back on them, particularly trying to run them out of business, and ultimately did with Hazel, I think, and started a newspaper against hers and those kind of things. Mm-hmm. So for people who don't know as much about who you were as an Ohio guy who was in here doing this, taking over this newspaper, what were the kinds of things that you had to deal with from kind of racist in the white establishment?
Well, a couple of things. About the Sovereignty Commission, had its own police force of people. It was a secret police. It was a state-run, state-paid-for secret police for the purpose of keeping track of and developing policy of how to deal with civil rights leaders. And we kind of knew of this, but didn't know really what they were doing, and had no way of really having access to what kind of how many people were involved and what they were up to, until many years later, when the ACLU sued to get the records of the Sovereignty Commission released, and we were able to see our own files. So it was really quite. I would think now we would find it quite shocking. I mean, we thought it was kind of par for the course in Mississippi, but shocking that there would be a state-run secret police whose job it was to keep track of and develop policy of how to thwart citizens of this country and of that state. And so part of when we read about it, not only was we shocked to see what we read, but also there's a few laughs in there because some of them weren't the sharpest people in the world. Originally, I was operating out of an office in the very back of Robert L.T. Smith's grocery store. So when we published the paper at that time, we were on Valley Street. So we had our address right there. And so when reading about in my file, I found somebody more than once came to the store looking around for the paper, looking around for Charlie Butts, and all he found was a grocery store.
Wow.
And that's what he wrote down. He never went around the back and was able to find me. So it wasn't the best sleuth in the world, but certainly many of their activities were quite frightening of the sort of thing they're up to. One other story was driving down Lynch Street. I saw a little crowd with Captain Ray, who was the police officer in charge of whenever there was a civil rights event of some kind.
Right.
And I spotted him in his white shirt, and you know, I'm the news guy, right? I got to find out what's going on, and
Right.
it wasn't something. And this was Medgar's office building that he was at. And so I came up. I, of course, had my felt hat on. I'm 19 years old or 20 years old or something, with my tie and, you know, trying to look like a newspaper guy, right? And so I go up to him and I say, "Well, what's going on, Captain?" And he said, "Well, you ought to know, Butts." I said, "Yeah,
Butts?
you know who I am? Know who you are? I know where you live, what time you go, and what route you go home at night, what route you take." So I thanked him for providing that police protection, which is not what he was doing.
No, not at all.
And I didn't get any answer out of him otherwise at all.
Wow. Look, he's got up there comments by Charles L. Butts.
Yeah, so that was, I did use my name on that column. Then the other column was, what was his first name? Williams was his last name. That was the made up person.
Okay.
So yeah,
now
this was a kind of a direct copy off of Jimmy Ward.
Right. Well, and then it wasn't in the Clarion Ledger. It was Tom Etheridge, right? Wasn't he the one who did it on the front page there? I think it was his column. No, it was
I didn't remember him regularly being on the front page.
Yeah, but he had some vicious ones. The blood.
No, they knew how to be vicious.
Oh man, right, and just yeah, very racist. And people, I mean, the one thing I kind of say to folks, if they're interested in this history, I'm going to sound like I'm doing an ad for newspapers.com, but I've become a real fan of newspapers.com, you know, and I use it as a journalist. But you can really access so many of these especially papers like the Clarion Ledger and the Jackson Daily News, you know, and it can be really worth it.
They're capable of just the straight out lies, and something that was for somebody that that came out of the North, where newspapers were newspapers.
Right.
This was kind of amazing.
Yeah.
It's interesting. In the last 4 years, we've kind of turned around again, and lies can be acceptable. It seems.
Right. Disinformation. Right. Just like we're. Yeah.
Yeah. Disinformation. We didn't call it back then,
Yep.
but.
Yep.
But I mean, when the kids in Alabama were, well, not just kids, were getting fire hosed and attacked by dogs, Jimmy had the thing about that those were actually guys dressed up like women in order to try and, so it's just like what they're saying, Antifa was really the ones that went to the Capitol.
Sure.
So we're picking up right where we were in 1963 and 64.
Well, and I think this is a good place to remind people, or to tell people who might not know this, is that in the 60s, what you guys were doing, anything that had to do with civil rights or Black freedom or any kinds of certainly any kind of organized workers' rights, it was all communism, right? It was like that was the scare tactic, that the disinformation that all of this was communism, and the civil rights workers were commies, and it was such a red scare that was.
Well, you can go to your newspaper.com and find commies active overstate, and a picture of Bob Moses, Charlie Butts, and
oh wow, I didn't see that.
Carl Braden.
Oh my God, right. And you were supposed to be communist because of and so we've seen that come back up again, just this idea that,
Well, of course, we were much closer to the Red Scare. The McCarthy era was not that long before 1962, 1963,
That's
1964.
Right. That's right.
So, particularly in the South, that was still around. But it was around for everybody. I mean, I got vetted by the progressives who gave me money, by the labor people. They all looked me over pretty carefully, and to make sure that you were not tainted, because they didn't want that still could hurt somebody. And now having a headline like that in the Jackson Daily News didn't taint me with those people.
Right, of course not. Yeah.
But that's the one time I really got beaten pretty badly, was when I was recognized. I was still driving the paper driving the stuff that was going to make up the newspaper up to Memphis, and I was stopped at the same place for gas on the way up every time. And they never identified who I was, never bothered to. But after that was in the paper, I was recognized, and the guy came after me with a tire iron. Somebody else, for some reason, pulled him off. And
so he beat you.
Yeah, I didn't feel very good afterwards, but
wow,
he could have done me in, and this other guy pulled him off, so he didn't.
Now, where'd you say that happened? Where did that happen?
I was on the way up, someplace up in the Delta, on whatever. There's no interstates at that time, but whatever that main drag was, going straight up to Memphis. And
wow, was that the only time you were physically attacked?
Yes, I think that was. And I did spend a lot of my time in Jackson. And then, of course, I was up north some too. I would have to drive. That was a 24-hour straight through drive up to New York when I was raising money. And first time up there, I raised $95. But I met a lot of people who said,
right,
we can't help you much, but we know somebody who can. And then they introduced me to somebody else. We can only help you a little bit, but we can introduce you to somebody who can. And finally,
wow,
we ended up. To talk about being vetted, I met Stephen Currier, who was the Taconic Foundation, and so he had me vetted by his lawyer, and his lawyer was the grandson of the great abolitionist, and was also president of the New York City School Board.
Wow.
And so he said he's going to have a little, I cleared the vetting part. And so he said he was going to have a little cocktail party for me. So that was my next trip up north. And I remember going into this apartment, someplace at some upper floor, some fancy apartment in New York City. And the apartment was so big that they could have a sofa that wasn't up against the wall. I'd never been in a place where a sofa wasn't up against the wall.
Wow.
And so I remember sitting on the corner of that sofa chatting with Dorothy Schiff about the relative merits of printing a tabloid-sized newspaper. Now, tabloid to us meant the size, half size,
right?
As opposed to a tabloid grocery store kind of thing. Of course, Dorothy Schiff was editor and later publisher of the New York Daily News, which at that time was a very respected, the afternoon paper in New York City. And here was Charlie Butts talking to him. Also at that meeting was the guy that started CBS, and a number of other people who were very helpful to me. The truth is, I didn't know how to exploit what I had to the same degree. But maybe one of the most important things I did, I raised some money and kept us going, and that was important. But we had a lot more friends that we could tell our story through, who would then speak for us. And by us, I mean the young people of the South and the others, everybody doing what they're doing in the South. And that was important. I also, in those trips, ended up talking to giants like Walter Reuther and David Dubinsky. Walter Reuther, of course, UAW president. David Dubinsky, International Lady Garment Workers Union. So not only did I get some dollars from these people, but these are people with some real political influence, and that turned out to be pretty important.
Oh, sorry about that, Charlie. Sorry about that. I had a power strip that went off. Well, and listening to you, wow, to drive 24 hours to New York to raise money. I mean, I get it.
You're there 3 days, and you had a 24 back. I had a weekly paper.
Yeah.
It didn't come out by itself.
Look, I have, and I think I told you this. It's like I actually first started a small newspaper in New York City years ago, but it's like these small papers. It's like it got into my blood, real community journalism, I think. And, it's a struggle. You raise money, you keep them going, and now the Mississippi Free Press is a nonprofit. It's the same thing, except we can get on a Zoom instead of driving for 24 hours to New York City. But, but it's local journalism. And I think that's what I really like. And one of the things I think you were saying to me, or I read it in some of the coverage of you doing this, was, I think you said that when you came in as the editor, you really wanted to, you wanted to make it you wanted it to be a real newspaper, not as much of a political organ or whatever, for candidates.
Not a propaganda piece.
Exactly.
It was not a propaganda piece. And we were proud that we got large ads, often full page ads from a white grocery store who catered to Black community.
Wow.
I mean, that was our constituency was his constituency. And he felt that by going into our paper, since people really liked us, that really helped him. And so that was.
That's good business. Can you say who that was? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't remember the name.
Okay.
But it was I think it was Star Grocery, something like that.
There's still a Star Grocery. Now, I don't know if it's owned by the same people. Now it's kind of owned by Haley Barber's family. But there's still a Star Grocery in Midtown over here. I think it does a lot of payday lending, but that's, we'll leave that for another day.
One of the things I think it's important to say was that, of course, the people who were really the frontline people were the SNCC folks, and in addition to Medgar, but Medgar had been there for years, and until they shot him. But Bob Moses was absolutely brilliant in the way he could organize and train and stimulate these young people to just do a terrific job. We quickly realized that we weren't going to register enough people to make a big difference. What they were really doing was trying to embarrass the country into changing the law.
Right.
And what became the 1965 Voting Rights Act. I mean, that really was what we were after. But Bob Moses had this mock election for governor at the same time that a governor's election was in fact going on. And so our paper, that was a legitimate story. It was actually going on. And so we folded just perfectly into so many of the kind of things he was doing, but nothing better than that one, I think. And so they set up registration process. You couldn't vote in his mock election without going through a registration, and they made it tough. They tried to do not quite the same, but some of the same sort of things. It wasn't just a nice, polite process that they put the people through. But Aaron Henry won that election with 108,000 votes, I think. I don't know. It was a huge number. And of course, that was terribly important because when you're not well schooled and you're not well read, even if you have an idea of what freedom maybe would be, what is that word? What does it really mean when you're in 1960s Mississippi? But if there's 100,000 other people doing the same thing I am, wow, I am not alone. And I think it was so important for that whole mock election to underscore that with people and have them come to that realization and give them a real sense of power and the community.
Well, and I've talked to, and I knew Bob Moses. He was still here when we started the Jackson Free Press, and he was running the algebra project out of Lanier High School. And then I got to know his kids and adult kids. And in fact, without going into the story, he was the reason that it ended up starting something called the Mississippi Youth Media Project, for young people to do journalism, and change the narrative and all of that, because he kind of pulled me into some things, but so just remarkable people, and he was someone, or is someone, he left Jackson. I think maybe he retired in Florida, I think, or something, but eventually left Jackson, but had stayed, and he was from New York City, right? And had come here to run Freedom Summer, directed Freedom Summer, which, as you say, was really
well. He'd been here before that,
right?
Yeah, that wasn't
right, because he was in Macomb and working. Yeah. Right. But I said that wrong. I mean, he and Dave Dennis, right? Did you know Dave Dennis?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's actually right now getting an award. I think they're having a ceremony for the Margaret Walker Center. He and his son, Dave Dennis Jr. And Dave is from Mississippi, isn't he? I don't know. Anyway,
I don't think so.
I'm not going to quiz you. He may not be. I mean, I know him because his family grew up, that he stayed here, so I think of him as a Mississippian, but might not have been.
I might be wrong,
but I guess what I'm saying is that the ultimate point is that they you guys were doing work in very difficult and threatening situations, and I guess you had to have known that it wasn't just going to pay off or change something overnight, right? It's like it was
I talked about this a lot and had similar kind of questions, and
Yeah.
of course we understood what the power structure was,
Right.
but if we really understood it, we had no reason to be there. I mean, any sensible person could see there's no
Right.
possible way some kids with no money and no
Right.
power are going to be able to change anything. But since we didn't know that, um, we came, and there's a certain amount of, I mean, we knew that people were being hurt and people were being killed. Of course, there was a lot of people that weren't high profile people that were being killed constantly.
Right.
We knew about them.
Right.
Interestingly, we didn't find them right away. I mean, because everybody's afraid to talk about it because that puts you at risk if
Right.
you say, my cousin was killed or lynched. But that was the way it was. It was that kind of one of the stories that I guess I think of when I think of the threats was I had a local Jackson State guy who started working with me, and he had a camera. Maybe we had it. I thought it was his, but anyhow, that was our camera, and he did our photography. And that's important for a paper, particularly if you're taking pictures of lines of people protesting or trying to register and so on. And he was down, I think it was Macomb, um, and taking pictures of people being turned away trying to register to vote. And the registrar came out and grabbed his camera and took it. And he called me. He said, "What should I do?" I said, "Well, you better come on back. I don't want you to try and do something with this. I'll figure it out."
Right. Right.
I mean, so here's this kid dressed up like an adult, right, with my tie, white shirt, coat, felt hat. And so I went down and walked in, and I said, "Where's the registrar?" And I was directed to him. And I said, "I understand you took our photographer's camera." He said, "Yes, I did." And I said, "Well, I've consulted with the Justice Department and with the Attorney General, and they tell me that because that's worth more than $20, that's a felony theft. All I want is my camera back." Now this guy turned red. I mean, here, I'm just walking in there. He could just as well have brought other people in there and just locked me up or whatever. But I didn't know any better, and so of course, I hadn't talked to the Justice Department. I hadn't talked to the Attorney General. I hadn't talked to anybody. He gave me the camera back, and I walked out of that place and drove home and gave it back to our camera guy.
Well,
But that could have ended very differently, and no one would have really known about it for a long time.
And you wouldn't, I mean, you guys must have lived under this constant threat because you just don't know, you didn't know what was going to happen when, I
part of I remember you talk to so many young people who are wringing their hands and chagrined about how the mess the world is in, and that's been true. Was true back then. It's true today. It should be, because it is. There is a mess. There's a lot of things. We've laid a lot more problems on them that are huge. But when you're sitting at college or you're sitting around talking about it, that's what you are. You're wringing your hands, and it seems so big. How do you possibly take it on? And what I discovered was that your lens, instead of seeing this whole world that's more than anybody can imagine, that when you get involved in something like we did with our newspaper and others did with their voter registration drives and their sit-ins and so on, they're doing their daily job every day of recruiting people or planning and working, that your lens gets focused down to what you're doing. And then the world makes sense. And then you have real belief. I mean, we didn't have any real reason to have hope, but we did. Very different from the latter 60s when everybody came so disillusioned with the Vietnam War and Nixon and all of the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we thought we were going to win. I mean, we had no reason to think that.
Wow.
And yet we felt very much that this is something worth doing because it's important, and we think when we do win, it's going to make the world better.
Well, and as you talk, I think of Mississippi now, and after everything y'all went through there, we still have this. And I'm not talking about politics. It's this hopelessness that kind of permeates in many ways that we can't do certain things as a state. We still, and I grew up here, so I understand it kind of, internally, this kind of inferiority complex or something, and that you have to run from Mississippi, and that it's not possible to change things. It's not possible to, to not have a one-party state, like now. It's not possible to be a Georgia.
Look what Stacey did.
Right, exactly. I mean, it's and they don't have Mississippi's demographics, but which means that Mississippi should be able to at least field two parties, in today's world at the very least. And so I think that I like what you're saying, because I think that, I've often thought, because people will say to us that we're courageous for the kinds of work that we do and what we publish. And I have said so many times to people that this is not courage. What y'all did was courage. What was done in the past was courage. From the civil rights workers from other places to the African Americans right here who put everything on the line, right? I mean, so that's courage. And so I don't know, what do you, what would you add to that? I think kind of in this moment, even more so than like when we talked a few weeks ago, what's your advice to folks?
Well, I don't normally quote Mitt Romney, but like when he said on the floor, telling the truth is a pretty good idea, and it often takes courage. Mm-hmm. And it takes courage in the 60s, and it takes courage in the 2020s.
Right.
But very often it is young people who are willing to do that. Mm-hmm. Certainly in terms of the whole climate crisis. And of course, it is a crisis. It is mostly young people that are really putting the pressure on, and just doing amazing things. So find the young people in Mississippi; they're there.
Mm-hmm. And you're right. And then give them, and this is our approach. It's like find young people and give them the opportunity to learn and tell the truth about their own state. And you're right. I mean, it's not the kind of courage y'all needed, but the power structure is still here, and it will still come after you in various ways. We've done in the MFP now, we've done this series of stories, about the University of Mississippi, and there is a power structure that does not like, I had someone just yesterday say to me that the only reason that we were publishing these stories about the University of Mississippi and some racist things that had happened there was because I went to Mississippi State, and they like some of the coverage, but how dare we write about things that happened there in the 1960s? And you're just going, what? It's like, how dare we not write about the things that so many people like you and so many other people, put your lives on the line. You were beaten to do what you did. So I don't know. I just think it's still here. It's not,
But let me say to anybody else that's listening that, certainly a lot of other young people, mostly Southern African American kids really put their life on the
Yep.
line regularly. But I think most of them will tell you today, and I can certainly tell you that they never felt more alive,
Hmm.
and that um, courage is a very invigorating thing. If that's indeed what it was, whatever it is that we were doing, it makes you feel alive, and certainly changes your life. Could end your life, I suppose, but it changes your life. And I think that's true in a lot of fields where people take on things that appear bigger than they can even imagine, and whether they necessarily succeed or fail, that it changes their life usually much for the better, and their whole view of how they can operate in this world is quite different. But because things don't change, of course, overnight. I mean, I was had left the South by the time we had 64 voting rights bill, civil rights bill, and the 65 voting rights bill. But that process was a process, and being part of it is very invigorating. It's very exciting. It's very life lifting.
Right. Like energy on the other side of the fear, perhaps.
Yeah.
But I love it that he just had my favorite article in that photo of you looking like like yeah, I love it. You had the look now, for a young reporter. Now, how old were you when you became the editor, real quick?
I guess 62, I would have been 20.
Wow. I mean, that's
So
incredible.
not old enough to vote, because of course you're at that point it was 21.
Right. And tell us real quick, we're almost at the end of the show. So what'd you do? You didn't stay in journalism, right? What'd you do after Mississippi?
I went back and finished it at Oberlin College. Actually, the woman you might have seen in the back of the picture who wandered in, she's my current wife, only been married 57 years, I guess. She was with me down there and actually finished college herself on time at Millsaps College.
Oh, wow.
And so then I came back and finished at Oberlin. While I was still going in Oberlin, I wanted to get involved in politics. I got involved with a guy by the name of Carl Stokes, ended up as being his campaign director in 65 when nobody thought he had a prayer to run for mayor, and we came close enough for a recount. I was again his campaign director in 1967, and we made history, and they were dancing in the streets of Cleveland. In 74, then I stood for election myself. So always been interested in voting rights, right? I mean, that was my thing in the South. It was a big part of getting Carl elected. We registered 32,000 people that summer. And at that time, you had to take people to the Board of Elections, or they had to get there. There was no bringing a form out to them. And so it was kind of fitting then that when I ran in 1974 for the state senate in a district with 330,000 people in it, I won by 2 votes.
Wow.
So no one can tell me that every vote isn't important.
Oh, wow.
So I won a total of 16 years. The rest of them weren't quite so close.
Right.
But served in the House Senate and served in leadership for a while in the House Senate.
Well, Charlie, it's been just lovely to talk to you about this and to just really hear this history. I'm tickled that you reached out to me when you did, and that you've been willing to share so many of your stories with us.
And delighted the Mississippi Free Press is ongoing and telling the truth.
I know, it was a surprise.
Truth will make you free.
Surprised you when you saw that. I know, still truth to power. You know, so that's the thing. I mean, Mississippi deserves truth to power, I think. So thank you so much, and I hope we can do this again sometime, because I know you have so many more stories to tell. So you take care of yourself, and happy 2021, and happy.
May it be a better year.
Maybe it be exactly. Stay safe out there, and same to the rest of you. If you join late or whatever, you can still watch this entire program at the full link. And be sure to visit MississippiFreePress.com to catch up with the journalism that we have going on now. Nick Juden joined us this week as our latest reporter, came from the Jackson Free Press. So you can see his COVID-19 coverage and other state coverage there. And if you're motivated, as Charlie said, you always have to raise money to keep doing what we do in this business. So please go to mfp.ms/donate. And we're a nonprofit, and we are grateful for every dollar that you can contribute. It all goes to our journalism, and frankly was the reason we were able to hire Nick Juden. So thanks to you all. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with the next MFP Live, and thank you so much, Charlie. We'll see you soon.
Stay well.
You too.
Bye-bye.
To Charlie.